I know you're celebrating your, what was it, 10, what was it, 15? What was it? How many years? 16-year anniversary. Congratulations. You're going to go to dinner after this, right?
Yep, we have a
Wow.
reservation, 16 years. So looking forward to that tonight.
What kind of meal? Like steak or what?
Actually, a Cuban cuisine. So
There you go.
I mean, Hector, you know, I like to support all Latino businesses as
Yeah.
much as possible. So giving back to the community. And it's a beautiful, beautiful restaurant. So we're looking forward to that.
And speaking of, I mean,
It was actually last week, and then my one of my boys had a playoff game, of course, the actual day of my anniversary. So, and it was his last game, so we just postponed it.
how many kids do you have?
Three,
Three. Yeah.
three
And
boys.
that's it. Stop.
Stop right there, and three boys and two male dogs. So
Yeah. Well, and it's important to say that they're male dogs, right? Because even with dogs, right, boy, girl, it's different, right?
it was totally different. So the
That's
powerhouse
crazy.
is right here.
Yeah. So introduce yourself to everybody, and we'll get started.
Hi, I'm Inarú Guara. I work with the community in community leadership and activism, especially focusing on issues regarding Puerto Rico. I am a New York City diasporican, and thank you for having me, Hector.
Oh, of course, my pleasure. I brought you on because we did an IG live, like what? It must have been, it was right before Fourth of, no, it was, I did one right before 4th of July, but then I did one for Constitution Day or Commonwealth Day or Invasion Day,
25th,
the
yes.
25th of July, and it was you. Well, first we had Andre Muniz, who is runs Remembering Don Pedro, the Compton website, soon to be book. Javier Hernandez, author of Brexit, great book if you haven't read it. I suggest everybody reads it. And Cristina Mojica, who does social media for Boricuas Unidos en la Diáspora, who,
Bud PR.
yeah, Bud PR, who is from United States, studied there, and then once she got her master's, moved back to Puerto Rico and has been living there for over a year.
We love
Um,
that.
yeah, and then so it was the four of us talking, and then you were dropping knowledge and fire, in the comments, and and really generating the kind of discussion we were having on the IG live, and then somebody direct messaged me, and they're like, "Yeah, get Brooklyn Storm. Your handle's Brooklyn Storm on
IG,
Instagram, and what an appropriate handle because you came in like a storm from Brooklyn."
that's it.
And just blew us all away. I made clips of the video, and those videos went, they got a buzz, and so I wanted to bring you on because first of all, you're cutting off your head a little bit. Move your head, move your screen.
Back
Yeah, a little bit.
right there.
Yeah, there you go. And I wanted to bring you on to find out more about you. Who are you? Where do you come from? Like, where does this storm come from? So thank you for coming on. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. I don't know you. So I'm so interested in knowing. Obviously, just by the way you speak and the things you were saying was you were somebody that I want to get to know. And so, what's your story, man? Where do you want to start?
Well, once again, I appreciate the adding on because I wasn't a panelist for
Right.
that conversation and just honing in and really, and this was my aim. My aim was to, highlight the fires, the arsenals that continue to grow in Puerto
Right.
Rico,
Yep.
but clearly my aim was to unite, have this unity within community and grow as a force. So I sincerely appreciate adding me on unexpectedly. My story: New York diasporican, born in Williamsburg, Brooklyn, Los Sures, predominantly very, very heavily populated Puerto Rican neighborhood at that time before gentrification happened.
Your parents are
My
from Puerto Rico?
parents are Puerto Rican. My mother is the first one born here, Out of her siblings, everyone else before her was born in Puerto Rico. So she's number 5 of 8. Yeah. And she was also born in Williamsburg, Brooklyn. So I'm second generation Brooklynite, but dad was born in Salinas, Puerto Rico, came over when he was about 9, 10 years old. They met at 13 years old in Brooklyn, and that's the start of my story. Um, my mom, I was born into this guerrera role. My mother is the true Taína guerrera, as she had to fight from the beginning, that she from her first memory, for her parents who didn't speak English, who moved from Puerto Rico over here, foreign land, foreign everything, foreign culture shock, the discrimination my grandparents experienced. My grandmother is a rubia blanca, and my grandfather was a trigueño indio. So they had 8 children. 4 came out rubio, 4 came out my color. So my mother's my color, and she experienced so much discrimination and so much pushback. So she unexpectedly became their defender in language, in everything, in navigating the system, adapting to marginalization neighborhoods. So my mother became a defender since she was a very young woman. And that was the start of her. So
Right.
she broke glass ceilings personally, professionally, always driven for community, always driven for social justice, equality. She wasn't a young lord, but she ran with the young lords here in New York, and part of the Fania era. So I am una hija de la rumba, they call it. And she's my hero. She advocated against all inequalities and like I said, discrimination. And she broke a lot of barriers, not only professionally, but personally, acclimating to that whole shift in the late 70s, where women broke very much so many barriers. And I'm her child. I'm her child. I mean, I am the middle child. I do have an older sister, but my mother had her when she was very young. She had her at 17. So I was the second one. And my mother just got a hold of her bearings and started swinging her sword in every which way.
They say that the second daughter, I mean, the first daughter is, whatever, but the second daughter usually comes out. My wife is the second daughter of 5 daughters. And so she's the fiery one. She's the independent one. She's the one with the chip on her shoulder,
And we always have something to say.
Right, exactly. Is your mom still with us?
Yes, thank God. But my father unfortunately passed away in 2015. My father was more of the docile type, old school Puerto Riqueño, somewhat of, I don't want to say he carried some machismo characteristics, but
it was back in the day. I mean, everybody did, right?
Exactly, back in the day. So my mom experienced that whole transition, fought her way also out of that, which I call it negative culture, right? Negative generational culture. But great man. Unfortunately, they divorced when I was very young, 9 years old, and went through that whole co-parenting experience. And but nonetheless, Brooklyn raised me, have very strong family structure. I mean, I have 30,000 aunts and uncles since my mother was one of 8. And my grandmother allowed her children to flourish professionally. So she would take care of us, allowing her children to work. So I have 24 first cousins who I call my brothers and sisters, because we all grew up, or all were taken care of under one household.
Right.
And and that's basically it. My mother was just, she was adamant about uh, being successful, being street smart, book smart. Um, there's no gender roles here. You are powerful. If they try to put you in a box, you're not to be put in a box. She was, like I said, very much a guerrera, and I followed in her steps, basically.
Yeah, I mean, and plus you saw, she's the, like you said, the guerrera, the outspoken one, and your dad was kind of like quiet. For a girl, a young girl, I can imagine growing up and seeing that dynamic. You're thinking, I mean, I don't know, do you find, are you the guerrera with you and your husband?
Hector. My husband is retired military, but believe it or not, I am the drill sergeant in the home.
I
You know,
see that. Yeah, I can see that.
he paid his dues. He's not confrontational. He's not combative. He's very docile in some ways, but definitely a great provider, a great father, a great husband. But like I said, he fought so many wars that I didn't want that, and
Right,
neither did he
right.
when it came down to our family structure. So,
Yeah, I mean,
uh,
it doesn't matter who is the guerrera in the relationship, right? I mean, it's just yin and yang. Whoever wants to be yang, the other person plays yin, and it has
yes.
something to do with boy or girl, man or woman, right?
Right. And he's definitely my balance.
Yeah,
I've learned so much from him. Because of that whole fiery spirit, I learned to shut up at times
yeah,
and be observant and take it in and reassess and not be as impulsive as I used to be in my teens and my 20s. So, that all comes with age and
yeah.
experience, but it's definitely a balance there, a very good balance. With regards to the work, I'm just going to jump right in. I had a very strong career in the garment industry, straight out of straight out of
How'd
college.
you get it? What did you go to college for? What'd you study? And then how'd
I
you get in
went
the garment industry?
I went to the High School of Fashion Industries here in New York City. Um, I always had a strong interest in design, any creative performing arts. That was my release. That was my creative expression. So I made into the High School of Fashion Industry. From Brooklyn, I would travel to the city. I was always in the city, and I was traveling the trains at a very young age. So talk about old school and School of Hard Knocks. You're looking at her right here. Um, and got accepted to FIT and had a very strong career in the garment industry for over 20 years.
In New York,
Started
they call it what? They call it schmata, right?
schmata business. I was definitely in the schmata business. And it was a good experience for me. And I know you probably don't hear that a lot from other people with regards to this industry, but the companies that I worked for, and I wasn't a revolving door. I had a long run at each of the companies that I worked for.
What'd you
And
do
I
specifically?
I specifically did fashion buying and merchandising.
Mm.
Um, my involvement was in design, my involvement was in production, but primarily I was an account manager, a senior account executive. My accounts were Victoria's Secret, Macy's, Sam's, all the big box retailers from back in the day and as well as today, which required a lot of travel. Um, and a lot of time away from my family over the years. Although I started working remotely, I would say back in 2007, 2008, I started working virtually. Um, so it would allow me to be home more with my
Right,
boys.
right.
Um, that worked out, but it was still, I reached a crossroad where I didn't feel as if I was getting anything out of it any longer. But more importantly, I wasn't home. I wasn't around for the games. I wasn't around for the achievements, the award ceremonies, and I said at
And
the
that sounds like it
evening,
was especially important for you because you said right off the bat that you had a strong family structure, big family, everybody's together.
yes, yes, and I didn't, although I did very well in my career, but I never believed in hiring a nanny or having a caretaker in my home. In that regard, I was very structured within the old-fashioned outlook. These
Yeah,
are
no,
my
I was, I'm progressive. I would say I'm progressive. I would say I'm radically progressive. But like, I also believe in certain traditions, certain things. Like, there's, tradition isn't good just because it's tradition. Certain
correct.
things about tradition are good because they've stood the test of time, right? Like, however you want to, two parents in the home, right? I mean, that's just important.
Yeah.
It just is. I was raised in a single parent home, and I know people. My wife was raised in a two parent home, and I just see like the things that she had. She had a home base. It's so important for a kid to have a home base, right? Somewhere where he or she can go, where they're safe, where they're encouraged, where they're taught. And if there's no structure in the house, and there's one parent who, my mom worked the graveyard shifts, meaning she was sleeping during the day, and kids are left to their own devices.
Yeah.
There's a reason why parents raise kids and kids aren't left to raise themselves. Because what does a kid know? Kid doesn't know anything. They're just gonna eat cereal and watch junk TV, right? And it's not their fault.
Exactly. And, being a product of a divorced home, I did not want that. I remember the pain of the separation, the
Yeah.
anxiety attached to it, the the riffraff back and forth with my mom and my father, and how it extended into my other family members. My mom and my dad met at 13 years old in Fayette Street in Williamsburg. They literally lived across the street from one another. So all of my aunts and uncles, they know each other. So when I say it's a family structure, it's on a massive scale. And that sudden and permanent separation, I remember the impact of that. And although I loved my career, I did. It was about me and my creative expression and the longevity of it, right? How many people could say that they are involved with what they studied and their passion?
Right.
So I felt very fortunate, but I came to a crossroad, and it was a very tough one. It was a very tough one. It was like a death. I mourned a death. I felt that way. But nonetheless, the importance of being around for my children, of course, outweighed that personal attachment, so to speak. So left it after 22
Because
years.
just the fallacy I wanted to bring up, like, the whole thing of like, oh, women can have it all. I mean, women can have it all because nobody can have it all. I mean, for so long you were taught like, oh, you could pursue a career and be a good parent and be a good friend, and you really can't. It's like there's a saying with Native Americans: if you chase two rabbits, you're gonna lose both of them.
Absolutely. And I
And so you
strong.
got to pick your lane, and you got to pick what's most important to you, and dedicate your time and your energy and mental space to that, right?
Yeah, absolutely. But I was raised, because coming from this divorce structure, my mother, she embedded it in my head. You need to chase the two rabbits.
Right, right.
You're lucky if I don't throw in a third one. That,
Yeah.
like, my mother was so hardcore, and she was very adamant about me being independent, super independent, not relying on anyone for anything. And that
And
had
that's
its
probably that had to do with her probably being divorced, right? Because she probably felt like no matter how she felt about your dad, she's like, okay, I'm on my own now,
yeah,
and so she didn't want to. She probably had a twinge of fear, no matter how brave she is. She probably had a twinge of fear or doubt and uncertainty that she never wanted her daughters, especially, to have, right?
absolutely. And she wanted that negative generational culture to end. And she was going to end it. And she did. And she was very successful at it. But she also had her extended family helping her. My
Right.
grandmother became available 24/7, just so that her daughters and sons could flourish. So the importance of having that family dynamic played a vital role into who I am today. So that family structure is is a linear focal point. And I just felt, it was just time. It was just a crossroad in my life.
Right.
It didn't matter how much money I made. It didn't matter my investments, because the more you invest, like Biggie said, more money, more problems. And
Yeah.
it's truth. And you start to dilute yourself, and then you become attached to your wants, not towards your needs.
There's a line in Fight Club that I always quote, and I heard it when I was maybe a teenager, and it stuck with me my whole life. The things you own end up owning you.
They own you completely.
And it's like, and now, me and my wife, we've kind of leveled up to this place where we're surrounded by people who are way richer than us. And, the temptation is to just chase that, right? To chase them, be competitive, right? Keep up with the Joneses, keep up with the Kardashians, right?
But define rich. How do you define rich?
Exactly. Exactly. Like they're actually miserable, right? They don't have a lot of real friends. They don't trust anybody. They can't find love. And it's like, I also had, when I was in high school, I dated my high school sweetheart. Her dad was a millionaire, and he was the first millionaire I ever met. And I thought, I was homeless in high school, and so seeing that, I was like, okay, here we go. Here's a businessman. Here's the thing I want to be. And I saw that he didn't have a good family, right? His wife wasn't really in love with him anymore. His kids didn't like him really, and then he was kind of miserable and alone and bored. And I was like, oh, if that's being rich, then I'm happier than this guy, and I'm broke.
Way
I'm homeless.
You know what I mean? Yeah, it's all a facade, and it's, I feel sometimes, Hector, perception is violent, and perception should at times be deemed as criminal, and, chasing the fairy tale, chasing the perception. And once you get there, you're like, hold up.
It's like on Instagram, like when you find out all the people who are buying followers, buying followers, right? And I'm in that business. I'm in the media business, right? And so I'm seeing people who have all these followers, and I know that they're fake, but most people don't know that those followers are fake. And it's like, how do I compete with fake?
Right. I won't.
And I won't, right? But it's, I'm happy, I've so many times I've been tempted to they're like, it's $80 for like 10,000 followers or something like that.
Get that out of here.
Right? You know what I mean? It's like
people actually do that.
Yeah. But and the good thing about me, the good thing that's kept me from doing that is that early on, before there was a concept of brand, I had staked my message, my brand, I guess, my whole thing on being authentic, on being honest. And so, it's that kind of kept me, since I made that commitment. I'm like, I'm not going to buy followers, no matter how tempted, no matter how some consultant might say, you need to do this, everybody's doing it. That everybody's doing it is actually the reason not to do it, right?
Exactly. That's one. And just because everyone's doing it, that doesn't mean it's right. Like you said.
Like when we were kids, everybody would tell us, if everybody jumps off a bridge, will you do it? And we'd say, no. But everybody's jumping off of bridges now, like almost literally on TikTok, right?
Literally. And it's very sad. And I see that more now than ever before.
Yeah.
And I'm very grateful that I come from the generation of pioneers, right? Pioneers of hip hop, of breakdancing. I was a B-girl, you name it. I was involved in all of that. We branded Timberlands and North Face. We branded Adidas sneakers. We branded everything that you still see that they're running today. And I'm so, like I said, I'm so grateful to be a part of that pioneering mechanism. And it's shaped me, it's molded me. And then with my fiery ass mom, she had the reins really tight. Failure was not an option,
right,
at all. And my mother was more of the independent woman. You need to get a job. I was working at 12 years old. I lied on at that time, you needed working papers. And my mother forged my age on the working paper. And I've been working since 12 years old, and I've worked every summer, 2 or 3 jobs at a clip, every weekend. So that structured me as far as my independence and gaining financial education. But she also charged me rent at 16, 17 years old. I didn't like it then, but I, looking back, I knew why she did it.
Right.
So growing up, I grew up very quickly as far as the earning of the maturity badges.
Yeah.
And then my father, just because they were divorced, he was an advocate about education. If I got a 90, he wasn't happy. But it wasn't as intense as my mom. It was more like, oh, okay, you have to study a little bit harder. He was always very gentle and docile, but just knowing that he wasn't happy. And I was very close. Out of the three of us, I was very close to my father.
Yeah. My wife's the same way, daddy's girl. And she said that,
I,
her mom would yell at her, say the most awful things, and she could take that. But her dad having a disappointed face for a second. Ruined her whole week.
Forget it. I was heartbroken. I would cry. And he would come, to my bedroom and console me. He's like, it's okay. Just try a little harder. That constructive criticism, his approach was gentle, but definitely reaffirming.
Like you knew what he wanted.
Exactly. And he demonstrated that you could have all these jobs, but you'll have nothing without the educational component. Yeah. So try pleasing both of those personalities in two separate homes. And I was just, like I said, I was just tenacious. I was tenacious with my drive. I experienced so much as growing up, like I said, in a co-parenting household or two separate households. And just being in Brooklyn, my mother, she had to move into public housing. That was a revelation in itself, but nonetheless, the sense of community, I definitely hold deeply within my heart. My mother had to work and my grandmother was taking care of everyone else. And I was at the age where my sister had to take care of me in our own apartment. We had the neighbors looking out for us. I had Miss Betty on the first floor. I knew that I couldn't move from the front of the building. Everyone knew what it meant when the lights went on. You better not be outside. So the extension of my family structure definitely grew into the community.
It takes a village, right?
It certainly does. And
those villages have kind of disappeared now. Like my generation, the millennials, we didn't really grow up with that. We all grew up latchkey kids, right?
Yeah.
And then even now, right? Kids don't even leave their room or they don't even talk to their parents,
Yeah. It's because I call it the antisocial network. Yeah. They label it a social network, but it is truly an antisocial mechanism. So like I said, Hector, I'm very, very fortunate to have had those experiences and those exposures, because they definitely shaped me and hardened me. And it was the purpose driven, basically. It was the purpose driven. I knew that I was in public housing. I witnessed, things that are attached to that environment. Anything done personally to me, thank God. Right. Never happened. I wasn't allowed to hang out. If I did, I had to stay in front of the building with Miss Betty watching me, and that's how it went. And by the time my high school years came in, I was hitting the city. I was in transit all the time, and I worked after school in a bridal shop. So I was always busy, always busy, but nonetheless faced many, many barriers, discrimination on all levels as a woman.
Right.
As an Afro-Indigenous woman.
Right.
As a dark Puerto Rican woman. Okay. I was like, it was a rarity. Like people, they never believed that I was Puerto Rican. I was either always Dominican or Brazilian or Black and Chinese.
What think? What did you think of the whole controversy when J-Lo came out with that song where she called herself, I'm so the negrita from the block?
I don't recall. I'm sorry.
No, I don't want to bring it up because it's, it was a controversy, and people were saying she came up with a.
Oh, okay. Yes. I heard about that. These labels now, yeah. They are so delicate, and I'm torn because I was called negrita, but
Yeah,
in a
me too. I
loving
was
and
called negrito too.
forgiving
Yeah.
way. But at the same time, it all depended on who was calling me negrita.
Right. Exactly. If it
Like
was a stranger,
you
no.
don't
But
get
if
to
it's
do
your
that.
grandparents or your mom or somebody, right?
Absolutely. My nicknames were La Nena, of course. That's every Puerto Rican little girl's name.
Oye, nena.
Um, yeah, Taina. I was nicknamed Do Chavito de Azúcar and La Negrita, La Negrita. But like I said, it all depends on you don't have the right to what makes you feel so comfortable that you could say that.
Right.
So it was I could understand, but we have to do better. We have to do better with gatekeeping. We have to do better as far as ownership in passing generational pain or negative generational culture.
Yeah.
Like we had this discussion in our previous exchange. That's not going to happen all in one sitting. It's not
Yeah.
going to happen. So with regards to this fight, our fight for Nuestra Isla,
Which is
you
what I
know,
wanted to get into. I mean,
yeah.
I'm so sucked into your story, but so where does the passion for Puerto Rico? When did you start to understand, the plight of Puerto Rico, that it was a colony and that it'd been fighting for its independence and that the United States was denying it that?
Mom,
Yeah.
de chiquita.
What
My
would she
mother
say?
would, she would say, we're from royalty. It was just that reinforcement of identity. It was that reinforcement of culture. And it was through all lenses. It was through our music. It was through our spirituality. It was through our cooking. It was through family gatherings. And she held that so closely to her. And of course, that's passed down from my grandparents as well. Um, so my mother, at a very young age, just pounded it in my head. You are a warrior and you are a queen. You come from an indigenous bloodline, and the pearl of the Caribbean, and that Chiquita, she would just reinforce this because she took on her experiences and she knew what I was up against.
And she knew
And
what kind of armor you needed, what kind of weapons you needed, right?
absolutely, absolutely. And she also knew that I would have to face these battles on my own because she was too busy working. Remember, she became a
Yeah.
single parent. She was usually at work or two jobs. And there was a time where, okay, you have to fly the coop, sink or swim. My mother's a very big pusher for sink or swim, belief, so to speak. And but that chiquita, and then I witnessed her. I witnessed her being steadfast with her beliefs and with strongly in her beliefs in equality. So that shows me that she's been through so much,
Yeah.
just like I did. But at that time, it was a little bit more aggressive.
Right.
It was a turning point in the 70s, where gender roles were broken. And, it was a societal shift, right? Coming out of the Woodstock era and then this whole independence. And you saw it on so many different levels. You saw it in different markets. You saw it in different cultures. Like I said, it was a true societal shift. So, but my mother always made sure that we remained, like I said, aggressive in knowing who we are.
And that's so important that most of us get like a lot of bullshit put in our head at an early age. They I don't know what your religious stance is, but like for me, I don't like the fact that religion goes after kids because they know like when adults tell you something, especially your parents, you swallow it wholeheartely, right? You have no skepticism as a kid, right? You believe everything. And so, if people are saying, oh, if you're a guy or you're a girl, if you like another girl, you're going to hell. Kids believe that. And even if they grow out of religion and they become woke or whatever, there's in their soul, the depth of their soul, the floor of their soul, they have that fear of hell, right? Forever. because you were told it as a kid. But so to have your mom telling you you're a queen, you come from this indigenous, beautiful bloodline, you know, you are making that a part of the fiber of your being from a young age, right? And that's why it's so important. Again, that's why, you know, I'm 36, but I sound like an old man because I'm like, we gotta watch what kids are seeing and listening to, right?
Absolutely.
Don't just give them a screen and let them listen to whatever music, whatever shows, whatever they want to watch, because they're sponges, and they might unlearn that stuff when they're in college or whatever, when they're older, but it's still going to stay part of them, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I'm a progressive man. I'm a woke person, but I grew up on a lot of misogynistic, homophobic music, you know, and I still listen to it, right? So it's tough to shake that, right? I'm an atheist, but I'm still part of me is still afraid of not only the devil but of God, of his wrath, right? So it's really important to that we remember that kids aren't, you know, they don't have. There's this whole thing of like kids are treat them like as if they're adults already, right? As if they can make their own decisions, and a kid doesn't know anything, you know.
No, at all. And, you know, you hit the nail right on the head. I'm going to close this curtain. Just give me a second.
Go ahead.
Hold on.
Yeah.
Okay. You know, you hit the nail right on the head. It's lead by example, right? Always lead by example. And at the same time, you can't unsee shit.
Yeah. Or unhear it. Yeah.
Right? So that's what led me to leaving my career behind that I love so much. But there was also another part of me is that you're too comfortable. You shouldn't stay this comfortable. You should always challenge yourself. So I left the garment career behind, and I thought I wanted to get into the food business. I opened up 2 food trucks.
Oh, yeah?
Catering business, just because it was mobile. So I'm a person of movement. I'm sure you've picked that up already. I can't be confined.
You're moving a lot in this interview.
Exactly. It allowed me to cultivate relationships within the community, to service food vending events, do the football games and the baseball games here in town, hence being closer to my children, learning about their friends, learning of their environment. Even though I had this flexibility at work with working virtually and leaving at 3 p.m. from the city, but I still wasn't available. Right. I was physically here, but I wasn't available.
Right.
And because I didn't want to damage or mess up that arrangement, so to speak, I committed even harder. So yes, I was virtual, but yet I was working more. And I finally reached a crossroad and said, aquí llegué. I got off the bus. I planned it out for 4 years, saved up. I made sure I contributed to their 529. Like I'm a prepper. I'm a very big prepper. And there has to be a game.
You don't have
plan.
like a closet full of toilet paper or anything like that,
right?
You might. You might.
I have the bunker. I'm not a toilet paper hoarder.
Yeah.
But I will go to different ShopRites and Stop and Shop and buy 3 or 4 at a time, because that's just, well, you know why now.
Yeah.
But you always be ready. If you stay ready, you never have to get ready.
Yeah. Well, that's good, right? It's kind of like what like they tell you, it's better to keep an A than have to earn an A, right?
Correct.
To get to here is tough. You just stay here, stay ready.
Yeah, and that was Dad, right? You stay ready, the educational component, and Mom's like, you stay ready with your sword.
Well, that's beautiful. They're both teaching you, stressing different angles of life, right?
Yeah, but it was hard. It was hard because since they were separated, their how they accelerated. It was they didn't yield a lot.
Well,
And
yeah, I
they
mean, it's I think like because my when I met my wife, she already had a baby daddy, and he's still very much in the picture. They co-parent, but like it's there's a I can see on his end he's a good dad. He tries to be a good dad, right? And for me, if you try to be a good dad, you're a good dad because my dad didn't try at all. So if you're trying to be a good dad, you're a good dad. And they don't want to yield because it's like you're yielding your child,
yeah,
right?
yeah. And because it was the separate households, they didn't understand, how much pressure that put on
They didn't
us.
talk.
No, oh no,
Yeah, this is back in
no.
the day. Now people talk, right? Now they co-parent like
Yeah,
for
no,
real.
they were back and forth. They were divorced and then they reconciled, and it was so confusing, and it was great and damaging at the same time. It was mixed messages, and that went on for a good 10 years after they divorced. So I didn't one time I would walk in and my father's there. I'm like, oh, okay, you're back. Okay. So, and then in 6 months he was gone again, no explanation. So that inconsistency um, really drove me to be consistent. Not a toilet paper hoarder, but consistent enough. And but I was always back and forth to Puerto Rico. My grandparents moved back when I was 14, 15 years old. I did the summer vacations. I also did the Easter breaks. I was the gringa when I went over there with my Brooklyn Spanglish, but very defensive about it. I don't care. I say it this way, ija. And I was finally accepted in the neighborhood because I could break dance.
Mm,
So I was the cool gringa to
right.
teach them how to do this and teach them how to do that. But nonetheless, always back and forth to Puerto Rico, which I enjoyed. So, with being within your community, within the culture, people that look like you, talk like you, dress like you, it was a very big relief. And then I had to armor up when I came back because the belly of the beast,
Right.
right? Discrimination, people not believing I'm Puerto Rican. I was a very big tomboy just because they thought that girls couldn't play certain sports. I rocked everything. I did stickball, I did basketball, I did volleyball, relay race, you name it. Scully, it didn't matter.
What's
It didn't
Scully?
matter. Uh, Scully is when you take the bottle cap and you create a board on the ground, and within that board you have either you have 13 spaces, but they're set up in different corners of the board,
Mm-hmm.
and you have to create a skelly cap, which you did out of a soda pop cap or beer cap. You would melt wax in it so it could create weight, and you would have to flick it numerically from one box to the next. And I think the square was 12 by 12.
Kids listening to this right now are gonna be like, "You made
What
toys,
yeah,
first of all."
you're like ancient. Get this lady off. That's what they're saying. But nonetheless, it was very challenging. You had to flick the cap into the next number and get it evenly inside the square. So did all of that. Like I said, I handball queen, double Dutch queen. I had the best of both worlds.
Yeah.
I predominantly Latino and Black neighborhood when my
I was
mother
gonna
lived.
ask you about that. I mean, they say Brooklyn's changed. I mean, has it changed? Is that all gone? That world you were raised in?
Well, the projects are still there. I haven't been back there in over 25 years, so I don't know the dynamic, the structure now. But nonetheless, like I said, I had that extended family structure
Yeah.
within my neighbors because it really was a village. It like Miss Betty had the right to tell me, "You go in the house now."
Right.
It never got to that point.
Right. Exactly.
Never got to that point ever.
And it's not
Ever,
like we were like
ever.
bitch ass kids. We were tough kids. Uh, but like
Respectful.
but we were respectful, right? I think the tougher
And
as a
we were
kid
very
you are,
principled.
like the tougher you are as
God,
a
I'm
kid,
sorry.
the more respectful you are to people. Like the more you're out on the street
Absolutely.
and the tougher you are, because things happen to you, so you learn that the street teaches you respect, right?
Absolutely. And there's codes to everything, right? There's order and there's laws. There's law and order throughout. And look, to this day I still call her Miss Betty.
Yeah.
Miss Betty. And do you want anything from the store, Miss Betty? And she would give me her list and I would comply. And she didn't even have to time me because I knew I had to go from the store straight back.
Right.
There was no detouring. I never snuck out the window from the second floor to be out in the street. I didn't do any of that. And but I was also around the crack era. I was, the development of hip hop, the creation of hip hop, the creation of b-boy, the creation of breakdancing. This was all this was a ventilating mechanism. And that was our creative form. We had nothing else but each other. So instead of, the late 70s, there were a lot of gangs that I was a part of that whole transitioning out, in where you showed your skill set through some type of art form. And I loved it. I loved it. So although, I lived in public housing and in these projects, it didn't feel that way.
Right.
It didn't feel that way because we were all the same and everybody looked out for each other. Yeah, you had your crime. Yeah, the crack era was terrible, you know.
My dad was a crackhead and a Chicago police officer at the same time. So go figure.
So you know,
Yeah.
and being a part of that, it was treacherous, but like I said, it drove me to excel. Like I got to get out of here. I it was like I said, nothing happened, nothing bad ever happened to me.
Wait, but your parents gave you that confidence to think that, right? I mean, speaking for myself or speaking for people that I know, like when your parents aren't giving you reaffirming messages from when you're a kid and you are raised in that kind of environment, the thought of getting out of there doesn't occur to you. You think, who am I to even try? If all these people around me cannot get out, who am I to get out? So you don't even think about it. It took me a long time I was just stubborn. I didn't want to be a statistic, right? I didn't, it's part of the whole thing. When your dad leaves you, I'm the firstborn son. I have his name, first, middle, last.
Wow.
And so he leaves me. And so, I guess I had that thing of like, I'm going to show him. I'm going to become somebody he's going to wish he would have stayed in my life. You know what I mean?
Yep. Totally. And that expectation, right? It's almost becomes a part of your genetic makeup, right? It's almost forced upon you, which is a part of that negative culture too. But at that time, we didn't know better. That's just how it is.
Right.
This is your role. And even between my sister and I, we're 6 years apart, and she wasn't as tenacious as I was because she literally grew up with my mom. My mom had her.
I was going to say, for 6 years, she was by herself.
She was by herself and took on the role of raising me so my mother could go to work. Because remember, once my mother divorced, she moved into the projects, separated herself from her family in Williamsburg. My grandmother was still in Williamsburg. So that's where that whole extended family of the community came in. And
do you feel, I know my wife has the same situation. The oldest sister, she's the middle, she's the second. The oldest is 6 years older.
yeah.
And so for, the first 6 years of her life, she was the apple of her parents' eye. And then, like, I know now that she had to help raise all the people who came afterward. Do you feel guilty at all? Like, because now, her oldest sister is not as independent as her, but as she is. And she kind of feels guilty because, like, the oldest sister was forced to not really be independent, was forced to, you have to take care of the kids, forget your individuality, forget what you want to do. You got to become the third parent,
And that role was definitely forced on my sister. Definitely forced on her. And I felt some type of resentment from her to me. And because I'm the middle child, and I'm this outspoken,
Right.
daredevil, in which she never was. She wouldn't dare talk back to my mom or my dad or question why. A look from my parents, and she knew exactly what it meant.
Plus,
So
parents get like less; they get more lenient as they have more kids,
as they
right?
have more children, exactly, exactly. And she internalized a lot, and
Yeah.
I'm sure there's some severe trauma there. I do know that, as we're all exposed to trauma in one
Yeah.
way, shape, or form. This is not land of make believe.
Yeah.
But nonetheless, the experiences, although in the same household, but different in character building. And she definitely still holds this role that I'm the oldest and you have to respect me no matter what. And I'm
Right.
like,
Well, that's never
dude.
gonna go away. I'm the oldest. My brother, he's the middle. There's three of us: me, my little brother, and my little sister. My brother's a year and 2 months younger than me, and he's bigger. He's a Marine. He's a big jacked guy, but I'm his older brother. I don't care how big he is. I don't care that he's a veteran, that he's been to Iraq, that he's seen shit. He can handle an automatic weapon and shit like that. He's a prison guard now, you know. He's my brother. He's my little brother, and he's my height.
He's your little big brother.
Yeah, exactly. you know, and he acts older than me. He's more mature because he's had more. He's had a tougher. He's got kid. He's got his two of his own kids. I have a stepdaughter, but he's my little brother.
Yeah.
But what was I gonna say? I was gonna ask you. Brooklyn's the best borough in New York, right? I mean, it's what when we're not from New York, people who aren't from New York, when we think of New York, we think of Brooklyn.
Yeah.
We think of that accent. We think of, and then all in my mind, the greatest rapper of all time, Biggie, came from Brooklyn. I know the Bronx invented hip hop, but Brooklyn perfected it.
I feel the exact same way. And we have our own culture, that's separate from the Bronx and separate from Uptown. And
for sure. The writers, the act, all the talent that comes from Brooklyn is distinct.
And not only in the hip hop arena, you have Barbara Streisand, Neil Diamond. It's a plethora. The arm's reach is
comedians,
is
all kinds of people. It's just
Absolutely.
What is it about Brooklyn that makes you, out in the world like that?
You know what? It's definitely nurtured. As a Brooklynite, you're expected to prevail. You're expected to succeed, and that determination. And we have our own language. And when we say water and what are you doing? And it's definitely the County of Kings. And we take on that role and we own it. And we'll fight you. We will literally fight. That's how, that was the mentality. Let's fight about it. Let's see. It was a very gladiator-ish mentality.
Speaking of Tyson, Tyson's from Brownsville.
There you go.
And he talks about, he goes around the world and he's not afraid of anything because he's like, in the back of his mind, I'm from Brownsville.
I'm from Brownsville. I've seen it all. We call it the concrete jungle.
Yeah.
So, and Bed-Stuy, do or die, because it's literally either you sink or you swim. So it's really being thrown out to the sharks. And if you can't swim, you better learn quickly.
That's what it is, right?
No one's going to hold your hand. And
like you said, you have to be challenged, right? And what's more challenging than being born and raised in Brooklyn, right?
In Brooklyn, but at the same time,
but the community too.
Yeah, we're look at Mike Tyson. How humble is he?
Right.
So there's like a hardness and a softness. It's a combination that I really can't put into one word. It's a lifestyle. It's you definitely earn your way. And being exposed to so many different nationalities also played a vital role. I had these projects, but outside of the projects, it was pure Italian neighborhood. Like it was the mob,
right?
The Bino family, you name it. And so you learned to adapt when you left the block, or you knew you couldn't walk up a certain block.
Right.
That pizza's so good, I'm gonna go there anyway.
Just act like you're from Sicily or something.
That's it. So it was a lot of adapting and also remaining true to your strength and not backing down, but knowing when to back down as well. But there's so much history and so much life and so much spirit in Brooklyn. It's like no other place in the world, to be quite honest with you. I mean, wherever you go, do you see a shirt that says Wyoming? No,
Yeah.
you see Brooklyn, and then you see what's attached to that, and it's synonymous with strength and being tenacious and go getter
Yeah,
and
it's true.
being warlike. But also some negative, right? Being street like and being a big mouth and not knowing when to yield. Um, but like I said, it's golden to me. It's my birthplace. I was actually born in the Brooklyn Hospital. And it was a place of survival and definitely became head on as far as my experiences. It definitely shaped me in so many different ways.
So, I mean, I would think a Puerto Rican Brooklynite is different than a Puerto Rican in El Barrio
In El Barrio,
or in the
absolutely.
Bronx.
And especially the Bronx, because Brooklyn and the Bronx
Right.
always had this thing. Like I said, you have the predominantly Puerto Rican neighborhood at that time was Williamsburg. And then they ventured out to Sunset Park. And then they ventured out to different parts of Brooklyn, some in Coney Island, East New York. So there were the pockets, but we we were such a strong community as far as our community gatherings. Our beach was Coney Island Beach, where you have the Bronx that has Orchard Beach. They have a different style of salsa, the way they dance salsa in the Bronx, and we
Wow.
have our different style of salsa known as Brooklyn style. So it's very incremental, and but we hold our trophies just like any other county. But it is called the County of Kings for a reason.
Wow. I mean, I know we're at 2 o'clock, and I know you got to get to a dinner
It's okay.
reservation.
It's okay.
And I thought we were just going to talk about Puerto Rico, but
No, no,
I'm
let's
loving
go.
this. I'm loving this
Yeah,
this
let's go.
conversation.
I could give you another half hour. So, and I know
Well,
you're gonna cut this up and edit it. So,
actually, no. I mean, I don't cut it up or anything. I
oh,
just
you don't?
no, 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 no. I like because again, authentic, right? I like I'm an eavesdropper, right? If I'm on the train and people are talking, and I just pretend like I'm reading, but I can't. I'm listening to their conversation. That's just how I am. I've always been like that. But so I just love conversations. But why isn't Puerto Rico free?
Because the majority of us on the island are in love with our oppressor.
You said that you said it's like Stockholm syndrome, right?
It is
What
Stockholm
was the other
syndrome.
thing you said? You said there's something like Stockholm syndrome, and you brought it
Oh,
up.
Willie Lynch syndrome, but
Willie Lynch. What's
that
that?
experience that the Willie Lynch syndrome, if I'm not mistaken, Willie Lynch was a businessman back in the 1800s, where he was commissioned because he had a psychological how mechanism for breaking in slaves. So overseers, masters and overseers would hire him to teach that mechanism. And it was so violent and so inhumane. And they would treat slaves as barn animals, like how you would break in a horse and how you would train a horse.
Dehumanize them, right? The Nazis did the same thing with the Jews, right?
So beyond, beyond. So dehumanizing is a light word for it.
Yeah.
How to break them psychologically, how to instill fear, how to instill the syndrome, Stockholm syndrome, where they had no identity. They were trained and broken psychologically and physically through torture. And but there were levels to it where they would put two slaves against each other, um, formulating hierarchy. um, putting light-skinned slaves and dark-skinned slaves against each other, and putting one
I
in
mean, that's kind of the problem in Puerto Rico too, right? That you have
correct.
racism, and you give privileges to the white elite in San Juan, and it's a mostly dark black islands, and so Puerto Rico can't come together because of racism, really, right? I mean,
Well, the common denominator throughout the world. So it's not only
right,
Puerto Rico,
right,
but colorism,
colorism,
right? We have racism and colorism. So that combination. And in this infamous letter that he would solicit to these very rich families, and he would guarantee his work um, to a point that your slaves will never leave you, even if you open the doors and let them go. So it was a torturous psychological warfare and dependency, which included how to marginalize each other,
yeah.
how to viciously attack one another. So the sense of community could never be formalized within within the
Within them, yeah. There
and,
was
and he guaranteed that this mechanism will still affect the Black people for hundreds and hundreds of years to come.
because it's generational, right? Like
Correct.
you. I mean, it's people say, "Oh, slavery was so long ago," but it wasn't long ago.
Oh,
There's people, there's people whose great grandfather or grandfather was or grandmother was a slave,
yeah.
and so if you don't think that with the stuff that happened to your grandparents or your great grandparents doesn't affect you, hasn't formed who you are, you're crazy. You don't know how history works. You don't know how connected we are. We think that we're individual, but we're actually very connected to not only our family, our neighborhood, humanity, right? It's like this. I don't know. You probably heard of that. I think it was in the Bronx Zoo or something, where there was an elephant. He was chained to a stake in the ground for like 30 years,
Right.
and then they take the chain off, right? And the elephant wouldn't leave
No.
the radius of the stake.
Conditioned. He was
Conditioned
conditioned.
to just stay there, even though
Period.
it was free, right? Or there's animals at the zoo where you open the cage and they don't go out; they
No.
just stay in the cage because they don't
And
know what an open door means,
absolutely. And the fear, right?
right? And the
And
fear.
the safety of knowing here, my 6x6 square, basically.
And you hear that
And
with Puerto Ricans, right? Like, what are we
well,
going to
with
do by ourselves? What are we
well,
going to
with
do on independent?
correct. And with Willie Lynch, it was a form of psychological conditioning that dehumanized totally. And it developed, this combativeness, this combative structure of, just amongst Black people and then Black and brown people, and how that fell through it followed through generation after generation. And Puerto Rico is not foreign to that. We are a culprit of that. And I continue to experience that when I frequent the island. And I frequent the island a lot doing this work. And I actually, to be very, honest with you, I experienced that through my grandmother, but not my white grandmother, by my Black grandmother. No piensa traer un muchacho aquí más negra que tú. Tú no puedes dañar la raza. Búscate un rubio. Could you imagine hearing this at 9, 10 years old? When my mother caught a wind of that, because they were already divorced and she already had this thing against my father's mother, my mother literally ripped me from my grandmother's home and told her, don't you ever in your life teach that BS to my daughter of self-hatred.
Yeah, I mean, I know that as a dark Puerto Rican myself, right? Especially because I was raised around a lot of Mexicans, right? And so bringing around a Puerto Rican, first of all, with to a Mexican family, that's a no-no, right? But a dark Puerto Rican, Black
Right.
Puerto Rican,
Got it.
like you
Got
just
it.
feel like they just look at you and you can
Yeah,
tell
bring
that
out
they
the
don't
coffin.
they just disrespect you so much. They think so little of you so much that they don't care to hide the expression of disgust on their face.
Ever. I went through all of that, Hector.
Right.
And this is the common denominator. And I appreciate you bringing me on and us having this discussion because it's a very, very big generational issue. And, and like I said, even at my age, I experience it when I go to PR and I become very rebellious when I feel it. You could even you know it when you walk into a
I try to
room.
tell people that, like, I said that on another podcast. Like, you walk into a room and there's like a pressure change
No,
in the
that's
room.
it. That's
And
it.
maybe white people think we're making that up, that we're being sensitive. It's
Yeah,
stupid. You
of
just
course.
feel it. I don't know how to explain it.
But because it's all our life, right? It's
Yeah.
all our life. So we know the energy. We know the energy from a mile away. So, but to experience that within my own family structure had a lot to do with, oh no, I'm breaking this shit.
Yeah.
This is not happening. And my grandmother loved me to death,
Right.
but that was also taught. That was also a nurturing a trait. I just learned my fourth great grandmother was a slave in Puerto Rico. I found her ancestry. I found her ownership, and her name was Soledad, Soledad di Fruta. And on the document it says Africa. So, and then I learned of my long French side, and then my mother's side. So that was paternal. My mother's side, the papers only go back to Puerto Rico, not to Spain, not to France, not to anywhere else in the world. So, I am a product of the trilogy. I have the Spanish, the Africano, and the Taino.
Yeah.
And I understand that now, some people are having a problem with owning that trilogy or you're clearly just Afro Boricua or Afro Indigenous. Like, I'm not doing that, guys. I'm
Yeah.
Puerto Rican.
Yeah.
I'm not into this labeling bullshit.
Yeah. Me neither.
Okay. You're not gonna try to have me hate my grandmother who's white
Right,
or my
right.
grandmother
That's what I
who's
don't get. We're gonna hear it in October, right, on Indigenous Peoples Day. You're gonna hear all these Latinos shitting on the Spaniards, right? That they're rapists, that they were wolves, that they were blah, 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 monsters. We come from those people. Those are our ancestors. Just like the Taino is, I'm Honduran. Just like the Maya are, the Lenca.
Mhm.
We come from those white people who came in and raped our ancestors. We come
Yeah,
from rapists and we come from the raped. That's just,
right.
to be
That
Latino. That's what we are.
that's what we are, and there's nothing we could do about it.
Yeah.
However, my immediate memory, okay, because my memory extends to my great grandparents,
Right.
okay, who I know my history through spoken word through my great grandparents, not only through ancestry, but uh, through actually living and exchanging with them. There's no way. I mean, although I've experienced, that trauma with my grandmother, uh, I sort of I don't accept it, but I understand how it's a generational dysfunctionality. It's
Yeah.
a mental health issue.
Well, it's like what we were saying, that kids only know what they're shown, right? And so if you're shown something that your parents, it's a cycle. It's hard to break, especially before the internet, right? When
Correct.
you in your house, that was your whole world,
That's your internet.
right?
That is the world. She was my internet.
Right.
And I would always see my grandmother, my father's mother, always putting on lighter foundation, always straightening out her hair, um, always looking her best, always talking about my grandfather, who was this, comes from this Spanish lineage and was very professional. And he was the medical administrator in Salinas. And, it was all about perception and whiteness. And so she had her demons, and she tried, and how much of that was passed on to my dad, I don't know, because he was so quiet, but I'm sure it affected him. And it was just, I understood that she was not well, but my mother's like, don't you dare let that sink in. She has deeper issues with herself that you can't fix,
Right.
and like my mother was very harsh like that. Like there was no beating around the bush. She's like, you
Pragmatic. Yeah.
yeah, she was like, you amputated right away. And plus, they didn't get along and whatever. But
So she was
I,
she'd been wanting to amputate that for a
oh,
long
she
time.
wanted, yeah, that was brewing for a very, very long time. But nonetheless, that's my grandmother, and my
Yeah.
father adored her, and we
And you come
had,
from her. That's you.
and I
She's in
come
you.
from her, and and all the great things that she did teach
Yeah.
me how to cook, and just being loving and smiling, and I was, like I said, I was a very big tomboy, so she taught me how to be a little bit more softer, and young ladies smile and try on this skirt and let's go shopping and paint my nails. So I was caught up between those two worlds, between war and healing,
But it's great
basically.
that you had all those influences, right? That you can kind of pick and choose what you liked, what worked for you, right?
Yeah, and like I said, it created learning how to balance, learning how to block out, learning on when to be combative. But that's also through age and experiences. But getting back to Puerto Rico, I was always in Puerto Rico, always, like I said, exposed to our culture, which encompass our spirituality, our language, but definitely that being a New York Rican and understanding my community, right? And encompassing and integrating hip hop and that whole freedom of creative expression, and learning of other cultures, and having Black girlfriends that were from the South. And what did that mean, that you were going down south every summer? Well, where's down south? Like
Right.
South America? And like, no, down south. And it was south with an F, so down south. So just, being born into that and being a product of that, I had the best of both worlds, to be quite honest with you.
Yeah.
And it developed this fearlessness of you, like we had this discussion. We're a country that breeds war, right?
Yeah.
So you breed warriors, and then being a Brooklyn war, being a New York City warrior at that, we faced it all. So it was just developing all those traits and understanding that sometimes this is how it is, and there's nothing that we could do about it.
Yeah.
But that, like I said, that
Is that is
strength.
that is that the status? Is that where we are with the status question of like? I mean, I
Well,
don't
we
see.
touched on this. We touched on this on our last conversation. Like, how the hell how are you still in love with this beast, with this demon, after the unveiling, right? The unveiling after Maria, there's no denying that we are a colonial subject.
Yeah.
The lack of aid, the lack of
Well, apparently there is denying it because they deny it, right? We're a
like,
commonwealth. We're about to be a state any minute now.
oh please, like how many times are you going to be told no? And just picking and choosing parts of history you want to deem as being the truth.
Yeah.
I have a very big problem with that. So I would say, frequent going back and forth to Puerto Rico as a young girl and as a teenager, I always knew that we were a product of colonialism, but I didn't know what that really meant. It was only
Right.
surface level, and
Right.
it wasn't until I would say early 2000s where I was a veteran in my career. I understood, I had this whole business acumen. I came and looked at it from a business perspective. And I'm like, well, why the hell is a gallon of milk at that time $5? And it was like $2 in New York. And just, looking at it from a different lens, from a business lens, and Like, well, what's going on here? And how come I can't bring canepas home? And da 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 da. And that just opened the doors of, well, the Jones Act and this and that. And I'm like, oh, and the more I learned, like I already was upset. I was ready
Right.
this war, but the more that you're exposed or you search.
I was gonna say you searched. You were upset, so that's the first step to knowledge, right? Something you see
Absolutely.
something, and if you're okay with it, then you don't want to know anything about it. But if
Yeah.
you're not okay with it, if it upsets you, you're gonna be like, I'm gonna go find out why this is like this, right?
Yeah. Right. And I'm that continuous why child, right? Because it was never okay for me. It was always a battle. It was a battle because, like I said, being a girl, not being able to play this sport, having long hair as a
And you're a
daughter.
queen, right? Your mom's
Right,
telling you you're a queen. Queens don't accept things the way they are. Queens
right. We
mold their world
create.
around them. Whatever they want it to be,
That's
that's what
right.
they make it be.
That's right. And it's never surface level,
Yeah.
ever, ever. And that began the journey. And then I would go to the island every year, at least 3 times a year from I would say about 2003, 2004. And then familiarizing myself with the politics of, the cult members of the different, political sectors over there. And how it was truly unbelievable. It was truly unbelievable. And that's where I take pride in being coined a New York Rican, because de chiquita, we had to put on this armor. We had to not take things for face value. We knew about the political gaming here and the creation of marginalization, and you know then you step into the business world and professional world and you see how it's really handled and how it's really created. These are just mobs. These are mobs.
Yeah.
The government's a mob. Everybody's a mob.
Yeah.
Every big corporate, it's a mob. One's legal, one's not.
Right.
Period. But
Exactly.
same,
Same thing
same
with
mechanism.
drugs, right? There's illegal drugs and there's legal drugs.
Same mechanism. And then also learning the stories of, Taino history and our spirituality not being told in history books. Like, well, we don't even exist in your eyes.
Right.
Like, what the hell is that? So it was never taking anything for face value. And I just took that trait, always applied it into everything that I've ever got involved with. And it wasn't until about 2009 where I became radical about it. Like I made it my business. And then you had this thing called Facebook. Don't, that's all you had to give me. That's all you had to give me. Connect with like-minded people like my, forget it.
Yeah. So I
And
mean,
then,
but how is Puerto Rico going to become free, right? I mean, I don't see it happen. I don't see it being voted, right?
no,
We have to either embarrass. I mean, I don't know. I don't see how there's not going to be physical altercations at the very, 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 very least.
exactly. And Hector, we spoke about this before, right?
Yes,
You
yes.
can't vote your way or vote in or vote out. You can't write to your politician, call your
It's not
senator.
up to a vote, right?
Right,
The slaves getting together and voting to be free. It's not a vote. They just make themselves free. And the
period.
master's not going to want it, and you're
Period.
going to have to fight him.
That's it. And you put his house on fire, ya.
Yeah.
That's it. Like we said, there's nothing nice about war. So I
No.
don't see you and I are together with this fact, because it's not an opinion, it's a fact.
Right.
There will be civil unrest. We don't want there to be.
No, of course
We
not.
don't want it. But what else do we have? What else do
And the
we have?
UN says if a colony petitions to be free or wants to be free, which Puerto Rico's done, right?
27 times.
Yeah.
But what happened?
The UN says it's their right. It's a people's right to rise up in arms and
Yeah.
throw off that colonizer.
Yeah. Yeah. And we have yet to do that.
I mean,
We
we've
did
tried.
We
We've
tried, yeah, in El Grito del Are, right?
Well,
We tried.
I'm even thinking of Filberto Ojeda, the
Ojeda, yeah,
Macheteros.
absolutely. And then, but what?
But then look what happened to him,
Because we have Judases. We have the Judas amongst the disciples.
So what's gonna happen? Nothing's gonna happen, is it?
No, it is going to happen. And I feel very strongly about that. And look how we connected,
Yeah.
because we see it for the reality that it is. And the diaspora really holds a very big key in gaining sovereignty for nuestra isla.
What do you think when people islanders say that diasporicans or diaspora, yeah, people in the diasporicans, they shouldn't have any say. They should shut up. They don't know anything. Blah blah blah.
I totally do not agree with that. We know this beast.
Yeah.
We know the colonizer. You don't. And like you said, I'm telling you because I'm from the state. I'm telling you that it's
doesn't make any sense to me.
Right. It doesn't make any sense. But numbers don't lie, right? We're very business driven. We know who holds the majority. Outside of Puerto Rico, we do. However, it has to be in form of rematriating back to the island.
Yeah.
You have to physically show up.
Yes.
Okay. Yes, we know the belly of the beast and we know how to fight here, but you can't fight from 3,000 miles away. You can't, you could politically and policy wise, but how far is that going to get us? We did that already. Electoral process, lobbying, all these, and nonprofit organizations, all these senators. Where have we?
And now the status questions become like a it's an industry, right? All these, like you're saying, these groups are setting up to make money, bring it, but nothing's being done. Nothing's changing.
Being done. It's you already know how I feel about that.
Yeah, I don't want to upset you before your anniversary dinner.
There's some people doing great work. Our reservation's at 7. There's people doing great work, and I don't knock them for that. But there's also opportunists out there, hijacking, grassroots, advocacy. And I've had that infiltration in shared spaces. I've had that cultural appropriation happening within this framework. And at the end of the day, it's who physically shows up. At the end of the day, who physically shows up. And this, this activism extends to many different arenas. Online, awareness, writing policy. I understand all those components, but we are surpassing that. We're worse than ever before with this colonial settlement.
Yeah.
In the disguise of Act 60, which is, a morphed version of 20 and 22, Acts 20 and 22, but now on steroids.
Yeah.
Okay. So we're losing.
Yeah.
We're losing in a very big way. That's the reality. You could be hasta la muerte all the fuck you want.
Yeah.
Okay. But if you do not understand the severity of what's happening and what has been, and know the history and understand that we're doing figure eights here by adopting the same colonial processes, okay, like this whole electoral process, it's just bullshit. You're never going to understand. And if you're going to be a flag waver but not a flag defender, get off the bus. We don't want you anymore, period.
And
okay.
And what's her name is Puerto Rican, right? Even though she was born in South Carolina, she's Puerto Rican, right? I mean, this whole idea that she's not, I'm forgetting her name, Camacho Quinn, right?
Yes.
People saying that she's not Puerto Rican.
Camacho Queen.
Camacho Queen. Nice. People from Brooklyn are so good with words. I mean, that's why you guys come up with a lot of writers. You guys have a lot of writers. Thank you so much. I know we went over, but thank you so much. This was a really great conversation.
I'm good. Let's hone in the meat and potatoes here. So,
sure.
The Camacho Queen. Listen, a couple of years ago, we were deemed as the perfect human, right? There was this whole write-up, the Puerto Rican genetic.
All the faces, right? All
right?
the aesthetically, we're the perfect human.
Right? And then they had this picture of J-Lo. Get the hell out of here. So when Camacho Queen accomplished what was her destiny, I posted the perfect human. She embodies perfection. Okay. And her identity, she never switched up. She said it from the very beginning. she holds it within her genetic makeup. And hasta la luna, right? Soy puertorriqueño hasta la luna. So does that exclude North Carolina?
Right.
Does that exclude Brooklyn? Sometimes, I go to Puerto Rico and I'm like, yeah, I think I'm more Puerto Rican than the Puerto Ricans here.
Well, I mean, James Baldwin said that he had to go to France to find out what it meant to be a black person in America. He didn't know, like, fish, they say fish don't know what water is because they're born in it, they're raised in it, they live their whole life in it. If you kind of have to leave where you're from to know about it.
Yeah, you do. And that learning of it, you can only gain that through, for me, my fact, by personally showing up.
Yeah.
That works for me. You're not going to find the truth. If you could Google your ass till the cows come home.
Right.
Okay. All right. It's his story, not the story. So his story extends to the World Wide Web. His story extends to Wikipedia and Google. Okay. So this whole dependency and gaining of knowledge, have you spoken to an elder? Have you been in those circles?
Well, I was going to say that too, that the other tradition that we're losing is that, people don't talk to, there's no intergenerational talk anymore, right? The Gen Z are all in their bubble. Millennials are in their bubble. Gen X is in its bubble. Like, the internet's the bubbleification of the world, right? And like you said, when you were in Brooklyn, there's all these generations mixing, different cultures mixing. And so you have all this knowledge, these people, this knowledge that comes from the people, right? Because you're not going to get it from books. You have to get it from what's her name? What was it?
Betty.
Miss Betty has the knowledge that you're not going to get at the library, right? Yeah. And kids are missing that too because they stay in their rooms or they're talking, they're listening to each other. They don't listen to anybody older than 23. They don't want to listen to. It's insane.
It's actually very disheartening.
Yeah.
It's very sad at the least. And that's one of the reasons why I got off the bus, my career, because I was witnessing all of this. Once the .com came into my sector, into the industry, and we're putting businesses out, big brick and mortars, I said, this is not going to change. This is actually going to get worse. And you're not going to have any brick and mortars. So there's the social exchange activity, right, within people, of going out and experiencing, going to the mall and going to Macy's and Nordstrom. That's going to become a thing of the past.
Already, man. It's already, right?
It already is. So I had that trajectory. I already had that vision because of my career. I had to write projections. How was I going to perform? And performance was based on sales, and you could see the decline and what are the factors involved with that, and down to international trade with fabric with China. It's all connected. And with Puerto Rico, I was also in a place where I'm like, am I holding on to nostalgic culture? Am I in love with what I was raised?
Yeah, because you want to evolve too, right? You don't want to be a fossil, right? You don't want to be a dinosaur. You want to evolve, but there are things from the past that are worth holding on to for dear life.
For dear life, and especially coming from the diaspora, you have a home. This is yes, you were born here, but you're not accepted here. You're not from here. You have a home. You have a country. So there was always that.
The people on the island don't realize that people in the diaspora believe, like, we know that I was born in Chicago, but I knew that, like, there was this place, Puerto Rico, and even at my Honduran side, there's this place, Honduras. That's where we come from.
Right.
We're here. We're not welcome here.
We're
going to grind. We're going to try to do what we can here, but we're not welcome here. It's not our country.
Right. It's
and
not our
so
country. And we're reminded that
on a daily basis. Yeah.
So that was the focal point. That was, I have a home. I'm a queen of my country, and blah, 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 blah. And then sometimes, no, not sometimes, a lot of the times upon arrival, I was looked at as an intruder, as a gringa.
Yeah.
It's like, why the hell are you here? This is not your fight. What are you talking about? This is so much my fight.
Which is
Like,
terrible for diasporican because it's like we're not welcome here and we're not welcome in the island.
ni
Like
de
what the
aquí, ni de allá, right? We're
literally.
the ni de aquí. And I said, pa carajo con eso. Yo soy de aquí. And I'm going to bring that fearlessness because I've been fighting all my life. But here, like, listen, you want to gentrify Chicago, you want to gentrify Humboldt Park, you want to gentrify Brooklyn, go ahead. That shit was never ours anyway. We always knew that. But I'll be damned if you're going to take over my country. Damned.
Oh, I love the way you talk, man, because I mean, people have to talk like this, right?
You have to be
They
gully. You have to be gully. You do. You
yeah.
have to apply your book smarts, but definitely the street smarts. And it's you have to be very well rounded
Yeah.
and expect the unexpected and acclimate to it. Like I could go to the Waldorf Astoria and I could go to Bed-Stuy and act accordingly.
Well, that's you know who you are. That's another thing that a lot of people don't have. Most people don't know who they are, right?
I know who I am.
Yeah, me too. I mean, I had always had a sense of it, and then I really now I'm at a place where I know who I am. I know what I'm not. I'm just completely, and like you said, I can go wherever. I can be around rich people. I can be in the ghetto, and I can just get along. And I have more fun in the ghetto. Let's be honest, because I like the people there. They're more real. They're more rich people. Rich people are always escaping. They always want to pretend like they're not, you know.
Well, what do they have that's relative to our world,
Right.
our real world?
And when you talk to somebody like that, they love you because they're like you're real and they're not real, and they realize I haven't been real in decades.
In decades, right? And that whole revelation, that whole self-revelation for them, self-revelation here, I'm good.
Yeah.
I know exactly who I am, and I know exactly how to defend myself, and I know how to be offensive as well.
Yeah.
And so Puerto Rico,
but that's what statehood's trying to do, right? Statehood's trying to.
Statehooders are just
they don't know who they are.
It's a mental health crisis. It's a mental health crisis, and slowly but surely they're becoming the minority because we will not give up. We will not. We're growing in our power, Hector. I know you strongly believe that.
Yeah. Well, all these people, excited about Camacho Queen, right? That's nationalism. That's you can't be a statehooder and proud of her,
right?
She represents an independent, separate Puerto Rico.
Absolutely, her very existence is
right.
Resistance is even down to us, and I think that's why we glorified her victory even more. Like, your time is up.
Yeah,
guys.
Here we come.
We're here. Hold no prisoners. That's it.
And she's a hurdler, so like it's even more symbolic,
Metaphorically, exactly. It doesn't get better than that.
Yeah.
It's synonymous to what's happening, our own societal shift. And I believe very strongly if we keep this momentum and grow within our power, how could we lose? But we have to go back home. We have to acclimate, because going back there, especially if you're a diasporican, it's an acclimation in itself.
Yeah.
Okay. But we have to develop community in order to be received in community. Okay. And then different communities, right? You have just different generations. And what does that look like? What does that lens look like? Because it's not a one size fits all. Right. What about the couple that are in their mid 40s or early 50s? What does that look like for them? The trajectory of retirement. What about the millennials? What about the ones that are in their 20s and they're not established in their career? How are we going to exchange and help build? So it's being received in community. And I learned this from a comrade, and I thank her for that. She's like, it's not going to work if we keep showing up on a singular level. We have to have community, and not a separate diaspora. Yes, a separate diaspora community that is acclimating onto the island.
Yeah. I mean, that's exactly what we need to do, right? Because the whole idea of colonialism, especially with the way they did in Hawaii and they're doing it in Puerto Rico, right? Make it inhospitable for Puerto Ricans, the native Puerto Ricans, and make it extremely hospitable for the outsiders. And so
Exactly.
that eventually they could vote for statehood, change the spelling of Puerto Rico to Porto, and it'll be just like, in 100 years, nobody will remember what Puerto Rico used to be. But like, so we have to, if we know that that's the strategy to remove us, we have to go back.
Yeah. It's a strategy, but it's a proven fact. We have the blueprint of Hawaii.
Yeah.
Like, it doesn't get any clearer than that. And I don't think that, I don't think, first of all, we'll never become a state. That's been proven already. And now, the highlight of that, or to support that response, is these Act 60 beneficiaries, okay, will never vote for statehood because their tax incentive goes away.
Right.
So they're going to keep pedaling that Commonwealth bicycle. And this is what we're not paying attention to. As they continue to show up, and they're showing up, you know that they are. I think throughout this pandemic, you had about 7,000 or 8,000 new beneficiaries during the COVID pandemic alone.
It's like a wounded animal. There's blood in the water, and here come the sharks.
Here comes the sharks, and they keep arriving. They keep arriving while we're trying to still figure it out. Listen, shit or get off the pot. You better start showing up. And not for vacation, like I said, not for a piña colada, not just to visit your family. A bregar.
And speaking of, I mean, on the 15th is the Independentista rally. You're going to that, right?
Yeah, I hope everyone supports it. I have a little issue with labeling it a political ideology del PIB, because that automatically creates a divide. That's been the history.
Yeah.
So it should have been named the People's March. It should have been named, Decolonize Now. It should not have had the ownership of one political party, because the
party is the problem. The PIP is part of the problem.
The PIP is part of, all three of them, to be quite honest with you. Adopting the electoral process, but trying to still decolonize. I don't understand any of that bullshit. Like, you need to just cut the whole shit. It's definitely a weaning process. But yes, the People's March, as I call it, is happening on the 15th. I have plans to be a part of it, to participate, because you just can't, defend Puerto Rico, que viva Puerto Rico libre, y not show up. That's just my belief. Not everyone has the flexibility or availability to do so. But I see that those who don't show up, their advocacy for it is spot on. It's fearless. It's so aggressive. So like I said, I appreciate this activism on all levels, but we can't continue to just talk about it. We have to take action. We're beyond talk at this point. It's happening, and it's happening so aggressively.
And the way colonialism works is that if a bunch of Puerto Ricans show up at an independence rally in New York, that's actually going to be more effective than a big rally in San Juan. That's just the truth of colonialism.
Yeah, and they have it down to a science as far as these political parties are concerned. You see more police presence with the PIP rally and the interrogation attached to it. Just all the bullshit attached to it. Giving them a permit but revoking it at the last minute, giving out fines, just the police brutality. It's a dictatorship, and especially against PIP. And that's why when we did, when Ricky Renuncia happened, it didn't matter what party you were affiliated with. We came out 1.4 million people, 1.4 million on the island, and the mobilization that we did over here in New York. We were not having it. We showed up as one. So that presence.
And it was so quick. And I think everybody was just, I mean, it kind of showed Puerto Ricans themselves, what colonialism tried to make them forget is that they can actually do things. They can
We
actually have
demonstrated
control of
it.
their island.
We proved it.
Right.
Look, we demonstrated our love for our country and the unity, and we were tired. We're tired of this old school rhetoric that hasn't worked. And I'm just not that person, Hector, to continue to repeat what hasn't worked. That's not being strategic at all.
That's
I'm a
why I
very
stopped writing. I used to write about it a lot when I was younger, and because I thought I thought I felt like a marti. I'm spurring on my people. Here we go. We're gonna, and then when Maria happened, and there was nothing, and people were still like, "Oh, this proves that we need to be a state." I'm like, "What?
Get the hell out of you." That was their opportunity. And they're opportunists, they're jack of all trades. They're just, like I said, it's such a severe mental health crisis and identity crisis. And I tell them, well, if you want to be a state, you have the freedom to get the fuck on a
Go to
plane.
Florida.
Oh, go to Wyoming and let me know how that arrival.
And wave your Puerto Rican flag up there.
Do that. Oh, and speak with your accent.
Yeah.
Let me.
Right.
Or better yet, when I'm in Puerto Rico and and a statehooder comes and they pop all this shit, and I get called communist and terrorist and blah blah blah, all this other shit, and then I start conversing with them, or they attempt to converse with me. Let's talk in English, and they're blah blah blah. Or how about the ones that have never left Puerto Rico? Okay, there's a big majority of them. They've never left Puerto Rico to the United States, but still advocate for statehood.
I mean, that's like, those are like those people who are waiting to be raptured up to heaven,
Yes. Yes. So it's just, it's just this generational curse, I call it. It's a generational curse. And we should have learned from 936, late 936, when we had the first wave of tax incentives for American corporation, but this was a federal policy that was created in which a big portion of the island was employed by these foreign companies. So when I think it was Bill Clinton, when he ended Law 936 and gave those corporations a 10-year grace period to exit the island, right, our unemployment went through the roof, and that started another mass exodus. But it was disguised because it was a forced depopulation. Okay, you have no economy. Started with the Jones Act. Well, first of all, it started with the invasion,
and then blaming the shittiness, the weak economy on Puerto Ricans themselves or on San Juan is so. Those are people who don't know what's going on.
They're so far detached, but by choice.
Yeah. Okay,
it's by choice. At this point, your allegiance or lack thereof is by choice, because the facts have been unveiled. We're not talking opinions anymore.
I thought the other day that after I talked to you on IG Live, the idea came to me, and this is going to be so obvious to you probably, but it just came to me that La Junta's there because they're trying to pick the bones off of Puerto Rico. And then I think they're gonna they are, right? And I think that they're gonna then watch America grant independence to Puerto Rico, right? Just like they did with Haiti. Just like they did with Haiti, right? They freed Haiti, but France is like, no, you gotta pay us for freeing you, basically.
Yeah, you gotta pay us for freeing you.
Right.
Could you imagine that?
That's what La Junta's doing.
Of course, they are there. They serve as Wall Street's debt collector. Period.
And it's not Puerto Rico's debt. It's America's debt in Puerto Rico.
It's America's debt, but a lot
Puerto Ricans are paying it.
We are paying, of course. It was a development.
I just wanted to make that clear to everybody who's listening, watching, right?
It was a development of COFINA, the state taxes. Who was consulted by the Lehman Brothers? Where's Lehman Brothers now?
Yeah.
Up, floating with the fish, right? Wall Street
Brooklyn
fish,
term, right? Swimming with the fishes.
Yeah, floating with the
in the
fish.
East River.
Right. And it's just, the whole composition of this Fitch's this board is anti-democratic.
You said Pierluisi's still getting paid
I would imagine so. He was an attorney for La Junta, so I'm sure those checks are still rolling in.
Why would you make governor the person who was representing the debt
collector?
That
goes to show you, he was not elected governor. It was rigged. It was rigged once again. Okay, this is the closest that we've ever came to as far as voting for independence against statehood. What was it? 52-48. 52-48.
Of the people who voted, and independence people typically don't. They don't vote, right? Because they think the whole thing's a sham. It's a colony.
Well, it has been, right?
It's a colony. Everything that happens in a colony is a sham.
Correct. Well, everything that happens here is also a sham, so we're not going to get into that. But
well, no, it's true, right? This is where it comes from. Everything that's in Puerto Rico comes from here,
right? Who did we learn from? The best,
right?
Come on, it's one mob. Everybody's trying to out mob each other here in these United States. Okay, but Puerto Rico, this was the biggest voter outcome because the world was watching. All eyes were on the prize. All eyes were set. So the generational trickery couldn't be performed any longer. But they did trick us out. They did rig the vote. The website, the voting website crashed twice during the count. All the ballots that went missing that we're going to find in 30,000 warehouses in 2 months from now, like we found the missing aid and water from Maria.
That's when when you see the video of all that water and it's stuff that's expired, and this was after a disaster, 2 hurricanes. That's genocide. That's like letting people die. That's wanting people to die.
It was right. It was purposeful. But it happened twice. There were 2 exposures of water. Okay, that were hidden. One on a tarmac on a runway, and then secondary was like a
warehouse or something, right?
No, the warehouse was of physical aid, of hygiene bags and portable lights and food. That was in the warehouse in Ponce. But so there were 3 unveilings of hiding aid.
And it's only what we found out.
That we found out about. Listen, I assisted with moving almost 1 million pounds, okay, in aid and actually delivering to Puerto Rico. Okay, the first 600,000 pounds was with several organizations in New York and New Jersey that got shipped by trailer, that got shipped on water. What happened? There was this whole bottleneck because of the Jones Act. Remember that no shipments were coming in? Well, that was part of the shipment. Next thing I found out, 14 of our containers were missing. How do you miss 14 containers? 53 foot.
You don't.
Okay.
You don't.
I had a heart attack. I died. I had a nervous breakdown. The next collection that we did, I said, I'll do it. It was a collaboration with so many different organizations. We collected an additional 350,000 pounds. But I said, I will assist and collaborate with you guys only under one condition. This is not going by sea. It's not going by air. It's not going by container. Because why? Because I already experienced what happened with the 14 containers. Do you know that?
Because of U.S. ships, right? The Jones Act is everything that comes in or out of Puerto Rico has to go on U.S. owned and operated ships. Yep. So it's like,
baby, yep.
That's the colonizer saying, you want to send out stuff, or you want stuff, you got to go through us,
and you're going to pay double, right?
Well, and they're going to pull out stuff. It's their ships.
Yeah. So if you want bananas coming from Ecuador, it'll actually have to bypass, the Caribbean, go to Jacksonville, Florida, offload from that foreign vessel to be put onto the American-led vessel. Who pays for that labor and that import? Puerto Ricans, right? And then to export into Puerto Rico. And guess who pays for that export?
Puerto Ricans.
Okay, so...
And then Americans get the profit of all that stuff.
They get the profit of it because it's creating American fucking jobs. And that's been happening since 1920.
Yeah.
So we never had the opportunity to develop economically. Okay. The boot was always on the neck. If you can't develop if you can't develop an economy, what do you have?
Yeah.
What do you have?
Right.
And then the tobacco industry, and then the sugar industry, Domino Sugar, and all this shit.
But now there's people like, now there's people born third, fourth generation under colonialism. So they believe what the colonizer says, right? Like, oh, Puerto Rico's terrible. Thank God we're with America, because it would be way worse.
Our savior. We can't do it without them. We cannot. Look at Haiti. Look at Dominican Republic. Well, at least Dominican Republic has light right now.
Yeah.
We don't with Luma. But we managed to get a hold of 3 airplanes, attached ourselves to the cargo physically, literally, okay, because we were already burnt by the 14 containers that went missing. We arrived in Puerto Rico with the 350,000 pounds when the military was still not there, and FEMA didn't arrive yet, and no one could get to the mountains because of the terrain and all this shit.
October. Oh, but if they want to bomb Baghdad, they'll do it in 24 hours.
15 minutes, right? 15 minutes. You send QRF out there. Anyway, we got to PR on foot, delivered to over 3,000 homes, physically hand to hand, door to door, in the campos, going through mud, landslides, live wires. What I'm landing the plane here, when we want to do something, Hector, it gets done. It got done during the recovery from Maria. And then to the reinforcement of us getting it done was Ricky Renuncia.
Yeah. And then
so
that's
it.
What else are we going to do? Now we're looking around like, what else should we fix? And there's a lot to fix. And now that we know that we can do it, and it's thanks to people like you who are passionate and knowledgeable and actually doing it and actually showing up, which is leading by example. You need to see people showing up. The more people show up, the more people will show up, right?
Correct. And that is my aim. I am not a talker. I'm learning just like you are. We're learning together. But I'm like I said, I'm very result driven, and I have to hear it, taste it, smell it myself, not rely on someone else's translation. We're not doing that anymore. That hasn't been favorable for us. Do we not see why?
Yeah.
The result is there, guys. This is the takeover. It's happening. And like I said before, with so many of us, how are we allowing this to happen? There's almost 9 million of us collectively, 6 million off the island. We wear our pride on our sleeve. So where is it now?
And everybody knows us, and we're prominent, and we got a justice on the Supreme Court. We're not nobody. We're not nothing.
Yeah. But you know what? Those entities, I have to always remember their statehood mentality. They have sided.
Yeah, right. So Sotomayor being on the Supreme Court is pure
and she
statehood.
said it. Well, and she said it. She says, I'm Puerto Rican, but I know my role as a judge. And my allegiance is to the democratic process of America, blah, blah, blah. Right? So she picked. We have to accept that they're not our real brothers and sisters. And we have to come to that realization. I know we want to have this, this whole beautiful love circle, and we forgive you, and, oh, you're not right in the mind. Listen, like amputate, let's go. Because if you know you have an infection here, or, if you find out you have cancer here, you're going to keep letting it spread.
Yeah.
No. Let's learn from what hasn't worked. But we have no more time. It's now.
We don't have any more time.
We really don't.
Right now. It's right in this generation.
It's here, and it's on our watch, and that's what moves my ass. Like, oh my God, it's happening on our watch. So we have to slap.
And people always want to say, especially my generation, people say, oh, if I was in the 60s, or if I was a slave, I would have done that. I would have told my master. It's now. You're a slave now. If you're in Puerto Rico, you're a slave now.
That's right. So stop the bullshit. recognize that we're allowing this to happen. Yes, I understand this is David and Goliath, that whole biblical story, but David prevailed, right?
Yeah.
He prevailed, and we there's just too many of us
Not to
to
prevail.
right. This way, we cannot continue to be a people who tolerate intolerance.
Let's leave it there. I mean, that's beautiful. I'm so glad that this is like a special. What it'll be like a special 2 hour, but it was important, man. And you can't dedicate too much time to Puerto Rico. We got to get this done, right? People got to know, because knowledge leads to action, right? And not a lot of people know, right? But as soon as you know, you get a fire under you and you start showing up.
But Hector, okay, maybe 25, 30 years ago, without this World Wide Web, I could give them a pass, right? Prior to Maria, maybe a pass. But now,
yeah,
when we touched every newspaper on the globe when Ricky Renuncia happened, every country knew about it. World headlines.
Well, I think people think, like, with anything political, they think, oh, there's a certain kind of political person, And I think you're not a normal person. You're actually, an extraordinary person. But you know what I mean? You're a normal person, and I'm a normal person. And so, like, I think this is important. Like, we're not, professional activists. We're not, you know what I mean by professional activists, right?
Yeah.
We're not, we're normal people. We're everyday people. And so I think it's important to see everyday Puerto Ricans talking passionately about this. Like, it's not something that a few people are worrying about. We all have to worry about this.
Yeah. And it's also a process of decolonizing the mind.
Yeah. Yeah.
We have to learn how to be uncomfortable. We have to learn how to create and develop and support one another. I strongly believe in for us, by us.
Yeah.
We're everything, as I said before, doctors, lawyers, and literally caciques, Indian chiefs.
And the system's not going to allow you to do it. I'm speaking to people
created that way.
I'm speaking to people who, don't wait for the system to allow you, to give you permission. They're not going to do it because they don't want you setting the example for other people. So you got to do it. And it's going to be very hard for you, but just know that you are inspiring and you are showing the way for people behind you, right?
Absolutely. And do we want to be a once upon a time people? No. This is where we're almost at. Let's be honest. In
a way, we have lost. There's parts of Puerto Rico that will never come back. Part of its spirit that'll never come back, that are forgotten forever.
But I strongly believe we could resurface, reintroduce it, perfect it. Some mechanisms that didn't work, do not even revive that.
Right, exactly.
And let's learn from our mistakes. But like I said, it's not going to happen all in one setting. And that's what a lot of people are focusing on. But we have to attack this. And there's so many components. It's not, you can't, it's impossible. So let's break it into compartments. Let the professionally handle their areas of expertise.
Right.
You're in marketing and journalism. I'm in logistics and operations. We need that
kind of like manos a la obra, right? Kind of, right?
Exactly.
But for freeing the island, instead of enslaving us, freeing everybody to their own job, whatever they can do that to your best of the ability. We're all working as a team, right?
What does a free Puerto Rico look like to you?
My wildest dream, I dreamt about, I wrote in Reconstruction, the comic book. I actually wrote one of the strips about a futuristic Puerto Rico. And I think it could be amazing. I think it could be, especially with diasporicans coming back, and it won't be the same as Puerto Rico before, but it'll be better. America will have left its mark on us, but it'll be a Puerto Rico that has pride in its ability to to do things for itself, that isn't waiting for America, that isn't waiting for anybody else, that is, but
what
I mean,
has America done?
huh?
What has America done?
Right, exactly. But there's people who still think, there's people who think to this day, the TikTok comment, on TikTok, all the commenters were like, oh no, America's giving so much money, dumping money into Puerto Rico, dumping money into Puerto Rico.
What are you talking about? We paid for this. We paid for this. This is not a handout. It's not we paid for this FEMA service that we still didn't get in its completion.
Right.
I mean, come on, when is it going to stop? Like, I don't want to be the resilient people anymore, Hector.
Right.
I don't want to, I mean, how many times are you going to stab someone? Okay, maybe you could survive from 1 or 2 stab wounds, but you can't survive from 800.
Right. And if we don't want to be it anymore, then we got to do something to make sure that our kids or our kids' kids, to leave it for them, to have them have that kind of Puerto Ricanness when we know it's so hard is mean, is cruel to them.
To be quite honest with you, as I've been throughout this exchange, and that's just who I am, I see it happening or not happening, like I said, on our watch.
Yeah.
I mean, how much longer could it go on for?
It's been 123 years, right?
Exactly. So we have to saddle up, buckle up, walk right out.
Well, let her. Thank you, Inarú. It was beautiful talking to you. Let everybody know where they can find you and anything you want to leave them with.
Yeah, I'm Brooklyn Storm on IG, and I fight feverishly for the sovereignty, liberation, and independence of Puerto Rico, and that encompasses a lot of decolonization processes externally and internally. But my aim is to have this unison in community and continue to learn of our history, learn from it, and actually strengthen our power, because we are so very powerful. And it's a culture that is unlike any other culture that's out there, but nonetheless, we're being attacked, we're being brutalized, and we need the unison, we need the togetherness, we need the physical engagement. And I hope and pray every day that continues to happen. I'm witnessing it happening, but we need it to happen a little bit more accelerated than where it's at now. And
I always like to end these conversations with free Puerto Rico, but it just occurred to me that Puerto Rico is free in all ways except politically and economically, and that's all we want: freedom politically and economically, because we're spiritually free, we're culturally free.
Exactly. And we're not going to ask. You don't go in asking to be free. You go in and you take the shit. Okay. It's like the 13 colonies wanted to separate from Great Britain. Same shit. Same.
Power isn't given, it's taken, right?
It's taken, and that's the only way. So I sincerely appreciate you bringing me on, and I look forward to cultivating, our relationship and in solidarity. And that's what we have to continue to do and replicate. And aquí me tienes a la orden. I'm always available. And
you, man, you tell me where I gotta be. If I can make it.
Let's all try to be on August 15th in Puerto Rico. Or if you can't make it, that advocacy throughout your platform, make it a Puerto Rico day, engage with local groups, create your own group. Let's do some. Yeah. Don't just talk about it, be about it.
Leave it like there, but go enjoy your Cuban anniversary dinner. Okay. Thank you so much. Best to your husband. I'm sure he's like, hey, we got to go.
No, he's happy.
He's probably still in his boxers. If he's like me, he's still in his boxers.
Yes, he's so chill. He was like, you know what? Let her take her time. All
right. Thank you so much. Have a good weekend.
Have a great one. Thank you.